poem entitled Bread and Music that made me think of Tybee. Music I heard with you was more than music, and bread I broke with you was more than bread. Now that I am without you, all is desolate. All that was once so beautiful is dead. Your hands once touched this table and this silver, and I have seen your fingers hold this glass. These things do not remember you, beloved, and yet your touch upon them will not pass. For it was in my heart you moved among them, and blessed them with your hands and with your arms. And in my heart they will always remember, they knew you once, O beautiful and wise. The Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Rebbe, once observed that there are three ways we mourn. The first is with tears, the second is with silence, and the third is with song. When we mourn someone truly beloved, we experience all three. Tears at first, then silence as our grief settles more deeply. And finally, song as we're able to celebrate the memories we hold deep in our hearts. So today is a time for tears. We say our final goodbyes to Tybee. We each remember Tybee in our own way. Judy and Alan, Roberta and Fred. We will all remember Tybee as your beloved mother. Seth and Emily, Michael and Joanna, Liza and Jeremy, Sam, Noah and Mary. We'll all remember Tybee as your devoted grandmother, or Ami. Tybee was adoring great-grandmother to Ariel, Eli, Charlie, Amelia, Max, and Eva. Throughout her life, she was a treasured wife to Arthur, a caring sister and sister-in-law to Lois and Louis, Ruth and Al, Jason and Lottie, and Tybee was a dear aunt to Jeff, Amy, and Misha. Tybee was born on September 16, 1921, here in Cleveland to Sam and Sonny Kurlander. Her sister Lois was 7 years younger than her. Tybee grew up in the Glenville area around 105th Street, near the old Park Synagogue building. She felt a deep connection because her grandparents and great-grandparents were members. Tybee went to Miles Standish School around the corner from her home, and then Glenville High School, which she thought was the only place to go. Her father, Sam, was a pharmacist in the neighborhood, and her mother was a businesswoman. She owned real estate and spent a lot of time collecting the rent. Tybee felt like she had a very privileged childhood, enjoyed activities like piano lessons and dance classes. Her grandparents lived in a side-by-side house with her family, so they were very close. Tybee admired her grandmother's wonderful cooking and developed a love of cooking from her. So she decided to go off to the Ohio State University to study dietetics. Tybee went off on the train with her satchel and sent her laundry back home regularly during that year. Tybee realized that the farm girls in her program made a lot of trafe, and she wanted nothing to do with that. So she transferred to Flora Stone Mather College, which later became a part of Case. The courses were hard and involved a lot of science, but Tybee persevered and became a dietitian. She worked at Mount Sinai Hospital. By this time, she was 26 years old and still not married. So she had a date with a man who seemed very nice, but he thought she would be perfect for his older bachelor cousin, Arthur, who was 35 at the time. So Tybee and Arthur went on a date to the Cuyahoga County Fair that summer, and they were married the next March. 18 months later, Judy was born, and then 2.5 years later, Roberta. Tybee didn't want to be defined as a stay-at-home mother, so she joined Hadassah and became president of her chapter. She learned to drive and expanded her world during those years. Tybee was certainly a woman ahead of her time. Then when Judy was in junior high and Roberta was in elementary school, Tybee decided to go back to work. She had to complete some classes, and then she got a job at Lakeview Nursing Home, which later became Menorah Park. Seth has inherited pictures of Tybee smiling in that kitchen where she worked for 25 years. Seth and Michael loved to go there after school when their grandmother was watching them. She let them run wild around that big hot kitchen with the huge pots. Tybee loved her work there and made great friends with the cooks and people from many different backgrounds. Seth has met people at Menorah Park who still remember Tybee, her wonderful smile, and her sense of humor. What a blessing that even during COVID, when people were so isolated at the nursing homes, Seth could check on his grandmother every day. Tybee adored her grandchildren. Seth and and Mike will remember sleepovers at her house when they were young. Their ritual was to watch MASH on TV. Liza recalls her grandmother as a pillar of strength and devotion. She has happy memories of going shopping and out to eat at Tybie's favorite Chinese restaurant. Liza knows that her grandmother was always there whenever she needed her, an ally, a cheerleader. Liza was also proud to show off her beautiful and fun Ami to her friends. And Sam and Noah loved to drive in every couple of months from New Hampshire to stay with their grandparents. They felt at home in Tybie's house, in their bedrooms there, and never wanted to leave. All Tybie's grandchildren and the older great-grandchildren will remember those delicious, delectable Shabbat dinners with chicken soup, stuffed cabbage, brisket. Actually, brisket was available at any hour of the day. When you arrived at her home, it would be hot and on the table. And also her delicious banana cake. As Liza said, Tybie loved to share the joy of cooking for her family and friends, always making sure everyone had enough to eat. The great-grandchildren will also remember going out to dinner with her and climbing the crabapple tree in her backyard. Shopping was a special hobby of Tybie's. She loved to look for bargains at Value City or Zayre's, often dragging Jeff along for the day. Tybie and Arthur had planned to go on a Park Synagogue trip to Israel with Reverend Levy just as the Yom Kippur War broke out. The trip was postponed a bit, but they had a wonderful time. Arthur said they couldn't go to any country that wasn't nice to the Jews, so that left them only Israel and England to visit. Judy and Roberta went to Italy with their mother for her 80th birthday, and Tybie took the family on a cruise in her 80s. She always had a sense of adventure, and when she got older, she lived vicariously through her children's travels. Tybie had 3 very special lifelong friends dating back from elementary school: Marjorie Stein, Sue Massing, and Edith Freelander. Tybie treasured a picture of them on bikes from their younger days. Tybie enjoyed going to exercise and water aerobic class at the JCC. She loved watching sports and cheering on Ohio State. She wasn't so happy when 2 of her grandchildren decided to go to Michigan. But Tybie's greatest pleasure was coming to Shabbat services on Saturday mornings at Park Synagogue, Maine. She sat in her grandparents' seats on the back left side of the sanctuary. Tybie loved her family's generational commitment to the congregation, and she inherited her grandfather's passion for Judaism. Tybie was Park's oldest living member and was thrilled to be recognized on the Bima at a special intergenerational service 5 years ago. After services, she loved to socialize at the Kiddush. She looked forward to it all week. And of course, an added benefit of Saturdays at Park was hanging out with Amy and Misha. Tybie treated Amy and Jeff like her children and certainly filled a special role in their lives when their mother died. Tybie was so proud when Seth and Mike became B'nai Mitzvah at Park and brought Noah to have a second bar mitzvah at Park with his Cleveland family. It was very special that Tybie was able to attend Ariel's bat mitzvah on Zoom this past year. Tybie lived 99 3/4 years, full of a good life. She will be greatly missed. And so today may be a time for tears. We are saddened by the loss of Tybie, but we learned much from her, especially how to care for one another. That these tears serve to strengthen and uphold you as a family. There's a story in our tradition about a rabbi who once passed an old woman planting trees. "Oh, woman," he called, "why are you planting those trees? You'll never live to see them blossom." But the woman replied, "My ancestors planted trees, not for themselves, but for us, that we might enjoy their shade and their fruit. I too do the same for all those who come after me." Tybie planted an orchard for each one of us, an orchard filled with devotion and love, and these will always be here for us. We must be grateful that we're able to share in her life. Tomorrow there'll be fewer tears, more silence. As the Baal Shem Tov noted, it'll be a time for pondering, a time for contemplation. Tybie will become a greater part of our characters and our beings as we integrate the memories and the values she taught us into our own selves. But finally there'll come a time for song. Time will come we can celebrate Tybie when we recall all that we learned from her and how she touched each of our lives. May she rest in peace. Zecher Tzedika Livracha. May the memory of Thelma, Jaffe be a blessing.
Amen.
All say amen. I'd now like to invite Seth and Michael to come forward to share some personal words, and then Sam and Noah will come forward and hear from some grandchildren, and then daughter Roberta.
There's really only one word that comes to mind to describe my grandma, and that word is Ami. As was mentioned before, my brother, sister, cousins, and I all call our grandma Ami. I spell it O-M-I, some people spell it A-M-I, and we probably called her that for the simple reason that we couldn't say the word grandma when we were very young. But I think Ami has a much deeper meaning and was the perfect word to describe my grandma because it shows how special and unique she was. Nobody else I know calls their grandma Ami because nobody had the kind of special and unique grandma that we had. Ami was a strong, feisty, fun, unconventional, had a great sense of humor, and cared deeply about her family and the people closest to her. One of my first vivid memories of Ami was at Mike and my birthday party. We were probably turning 7 or 8. The party was at the Mayfair Swim Club with all the boys and girls from school, and it was one of those parties where we opened up the presents in front of the group at the end. When we ripped the wrapping paper off of Ami's present, lo and behold, we found our new package of Scooby-Doo underwear. A little embarrassing to hold up in front of the kids at the party, but that was unconventional Ami. If her grandsons needed new underoos for the upcoming school year, she was going to make sure we had them and didn't care about giving to us right in front of everybody else. Ami's sense of humor was legendary. Even my friends, who also called her Ami, remember her keen sense of humor with affection. It has been so special to see my kids, Ariel and Eli, be able to have a close relationship with their great-grandmother. While they loved Ami's chicken soup and remember going over her house for Friday night dinners, they will most remember Ami for her spark and for her fun. We remember one night when we took Ami out to a Mexican restaurant for dinner. This was a bit exotic cuisine for her, and was one of those places that made the guacamole at your table. When Ami tried the guacamole, she said, "I've never had guacamole in my entire life. This is great." The kids thought it was the funniest thing ever, and we all laughed so hard. To this day, we think of Ami every time we eat guacamole. While the last 5 years or so weren't necessarily Ami's finest, the time I got to spend with her while she was at Montefiore was truly amazing. I know people would come up to my mom and say, "You are so lucky that Seth is there every day to check up on your mom." I really didn't think about it that way. I have to say that I was the lucky one. I got to see my grandma every day until the day she died. I got to talk with her, laugh with her, party with her, and be there for her when she needed it. How many grandsons can say they got to spend so much time with their grandma at such an important point in her life? It has been one of the best blessings I've had in my entire life. I've been thinking a lot about this and wondering why God would want people to suffer from aging and the toll it takes on your body and your mind. I guess that's what you spend time thinking about when you work at a nursing home, especially during a pandemic. Ami certainly wasn't herself these last few years, and her quality of life wasn't always great. Eating pureed food, relying on others for her basic needs, not being able to socialize or connect fully with everybody. She probably wouldn't have wanted to live this way if she was fully sound mind. But the more I think about it, over these last 5 years, Ami was able to teach us all a real lesson on what it means to care for people. Ami spent her entire life caring for other people, her friends, her family, her coworkers. This is the woman who would literally stand up during an entire dinner at her house, serving everyone and making sure they ate enough and were satisfied. You couldn't finish your last spoonful of soup before she was taking your bowl to the kitchen to fill it up again. Now, in her most vulnerable time, she was finally allowing us to return the favor and let us take care of her. It brought our family closer together, and this is the gift from Ami that I'll always cherish, and I know my family and kids will always hold on to. So I want to end by thanking the people who helped Ami and allowed her to deliver this gift to all of us. So, from the Walensky Memory Care Residence, Kenya, who Ami would usually respond to more than she would respond to us, Melita, Tanya, Shamika, Kim, Sharita, Gloria, Kristen, John, Jennifer, Cheryl, Vidia, Jessica, Deja, Stacy, Marla, Angela, Sierra, Kendra, Sasha, Tammy, Danielle, Tiara, Melissa, Daphne, Leah, Devonate, Jackie, Charmaine, Evangeline, Veronica, Rena, Antoinette, Sharon, Tracy, Sakina, Cordella, Lisa, and Dr. Smith. And from the Vinnie Hospice team that took great care of Ami in her last few years, Kathy, Cindy, Susan, Justina, Wendy, Cynthia, Akiva, Rhonda, Candace, Leslie, Nadine, Emily, Suzanne, Carly, Siobhan, Rachelina, Danielle, Heidi, Sarah, Karen, Dion, Pat, Sherry, Sandy, Shamika, Kay, Dr. Barbara, Julie, Michelle, Melissa, Beth, Donna, and Cantor Gary, and the dozens of other people that I probably forgot that cared for Ami. You are all incredible people and rarely get the recognition you deserve for your hard work. There is no doubt in my mind that you kept Ami alive and living better than we could have expected and gave our families so much extra time together. You didn't do it because it was your job. You did it because you loved Ami like she was part of your family. I'm so proud of all you and proud to work alongside you, and my family can't possibly thank you all enough for everything you've done for us. Thank you to everyone for your love and support. We will miss you, Ami, and we'll never forget what you taught us.
Ami could take a long time to say goodbye. Anyone who happened upon 24765 Sittingbourne can attest to this, even the mailman. And for Ami's cherished loved ones, especially her children and her grandchildren, the goodbye could be really long. I think many of us are familiar with the standard ritual. First, the offering of the food. It might start with some mondo bread, or leftover brisket, or a Russian tea biscuit wrapped haphazardly, misshapen, and reused tin foil. Yes, Ami was an environmentalist, Roberta. But it wasn't just leftovers, no. More often, it might be an opened and half-eaten box of pinwheel cookies from Mark's, a mostly full bag of pretzels, or 2/3 of a Klondike bar. Come on, it's still fine, she assures us. There was simply no way to walk out of that house without food. India would still be under British colonial rule if Gandhi had chanced upon Sittingbourne. The next step in the ritual parting was the triple goodbye. Goodbye number one would take place inside the house, where we would kiss, say thank you, maybe make plans for later in the week. This was actually by far the fastest of the goodbyes, followed by the much longer goodbye number two at the doorway. Here an entirely new and unrelated conversation would begin. She might tell you about how good of a deal she got from Marshall's. $6.99 for that, wow. Or a story about a family member, or something about the treachery of Republicans. But this wasn't the longest of the goodbyes either. No, the longest goodbye was goodbye number 3 at the car. Here, she would casually accompany you as you walk to the car, stick around even as you close the door, put on your seatbelt, started the engine. Inevitably, the window would come down, and a whole new conversation would begin, triggered by the new stimuli around, the neighbors, the yard, Aunt Lois's house. I can still picture Ami clearly, elbows resting on the car window, keeping the goodbye going. Sometimes, I kid you not, we would actually start to drive away and have Ami skirt alongside our moving vehicle to say another word or two. And only then, maybe 30 minutes after goodbye number 1, would we pull out of the circular driveway and see in our side view mirror her slowly walking back to the front porch and into the house. True to form, Ami has been extending her goodbye for these past several years. And unlike the old goodbyes, this long goodbye has often been hard. Losses to process, loss of functioning, loss of her famous chicken soup, losses later of memory and personality. But there were also good times amidst the long goodbye. I honor the memory of my last meal at a restaurant with Ami, with Joanna, Charlie, Amelia, at Melt at Cedar and Lee. This was a time when Ami could still offer her special blend of praise and condescension. Such a fancy place. She joked and laughed and told stories that night. And it was so wonderful to see her with her great-grandchildren. And years later, her birthday party at Montefiore, greatly diminished, yes, but from a certain view could still be seen as the proud matriarch of her beloved family. But the long goodbye took its toll. For me, it's been an extended grief, and I often feared that I might forget the Ami I knew and loved, the one who lingered, saying goodbye at City Point. Why did Ami give such long goodbyes? I think it was a direct function of her love for us. She loved her children and grandchildren and other close family in special ways. Her love could be fierce, not something to be gotten in the way of. But what I remember and cherish the most was her joyful love. She loved to laugh with us. There was nothing like seeing her in hysterics with my mom, Rumor, and I, and us grandkids. She loved to feed us. She loved to tell us how special we were. She just loved to spend time with us and to be with us. And yet today she's not with us. Her body has moved on. But in another sense, the lingering continues. Her memory remains. And despite my fears, is carried deep within me and all the others she loved, fiercely and joyfully over all of her years.
Ami was resilient, tough, and humble. She was the most generous person I ever knew. So much of who I am today is because of her influence. She seemed to have a profound effect on everyone she crossed paths with, whether it was a 20-second interaction with a salesperson at Mark's or a longtime friend who would wait until she was just out of earshot to come up to me and tell me how special I was and how lucky I was to have her as a grandmother. I knew how lucky I was. She was often so self-deprecating to the point that it could be passed off as a stand-up comedy routine. Why would they want an old lady like me here? Sorry, my chicken is dry. I can't cook anymore. I'm losing it altogether. The chicken wasn't dry. She didn't want the attention on herself, but she couldn't control people from gravitating towards her. She was magnetic. She always said what was on her mind, even when it wasn't appropriate. And I still think about her when I'm working up the courage to speak my mind and voice my opinion. I can't even count the amount of inside jokes that Noah and I have and we use in our daily lives that are a direct inspiration from her. Leftover food being called fresh to effectively market it to us. Attempting to serve us brisket at 5 a.m. right before we got in the car to drive 9 hours back to New Hampshire, and her having absolutely zero ability to identify different zoo animals. There's so many Ami-isms that will be passed on from generation to generation. There was never a dull moment with Ami. Asking for seconds wasn't an option because it was already on our dinner plates the second we let our guard down. And then thirds. We would then be offered another meal on the couch while we cuddled together and watched the Cavs game. She didn't like complaining. She made sure that we knew we were being ridiculous when we complained about trivial things. I remember her unbridled joy on her face when I got to see her interacting with her infant great-grandchildren. Seth, Mike, Liza, Noah, and I got to catch a glimpse of what it must have been like for us, toddlers in high chairs at the dining room table on Sittingbourne Lane, being doted on by her, things we could never remember. This house became a home away from home for Noah and I. playing baseball for hours in the backyard, Shabbat dinners where we laughed so hard that we had to leave the room, frequent candy breaks that she slipped behind our health-conscious mother's back, and watching her carefully tend to her garden. Ami was fiercely political, a proud Democrat, and she didn't care who knew it. It always inspired me to have a grandmother who took it upon herself to vote for what she believed in. She lived through 11 decades and continued to learn and educate herself while still holding on to tradition and wisdom from the past. I loved making her feel special because I could feel the appreciation when I called her on her birthday, asked her to dance at a wedding or bar mitzvah, or held her hand at shul. She was gruff and protective over the ones she loved. I never questioned in my mind that she loved us unconditionally, but she wasn't one to throw around that phrase, "I love you." She saved it for when it really mattered, and it would hit you so hard in the heart when you heard it from her. She was Noah and my only remaining grandparent from 2001 until Wednesday morning. And I felt like the amount of love and support she gave us was enough to make up for the lost time that we had with our other grandparents. She helped put Noah and I through college, made the trip out of her comfort zone to rural northern New Hampshire to watch me graduate. She would be beyond proud if she knew that Noah was grinding his way through law school out in Montana. I loved to take her to Jack's Deli, just the two of us. We didn't always have to talk to enjoy each other's company, but I always tried to ask her questions about her past, and I wish I remembered all those stories. I hope that some of you will share some of those stories with me today and in the future. The older she got, the more she cried. She was emotional every time she brought up Papa or her sister Lois, who was like a second grandmother to Noah and I. It broke Ami's heart to see her little sister pass away before her. She would have traded places with Lois in a heartbeat. And I think that's the biggest takeaway we can take away from Ami's life. It was way too easy for her to be selfless. It was not a chore for her. It was who she was. We live in a world of instant gratification, self-promotion, and far less compromise than the early 20s world that Ami was born into. I hope to keep moving through life with a strong sense of altruism that enriches the lives around me as much as Ami did. I know I'm not the only one here that feels her impact in this way. Love you forever.
Thank you for your beautiful words, all of you now. We'll call in Roberta.
I want to say something real quick. You notice we're taller than everyone. So I'll just tell a quick story. I was lucky enough to get to see Ami one last time, last month, or a few weeks ago, really. And it was sad. She was wasting away, the worst I'd ever seen her. But there was one bright spot from the visit. On the last day, Judy picked me up a corned beef sandwich from Jack's. As Sam said, Jack's was always one of our favorite places to get food with Ami when we visited. Another memory that involves food. So we got to Montefiore and wheeled Ami outside so we could remove our masks and eat food. Ami was eating some strange mashed item, but I was in heaven eating a corned beef sandwich from Jack's, piled high on rye. It was the 4th or 5th time we'd seen Ami on the trip. And each time it was the same thing, little to no association of anything. But this time, with the sandwich in front of her, I swear she lit up, if just a little bit. I possibly imagined it, but who cares? It really seemed like she got some joy. Maybe for one of the last times, doing one of the things that she loved most, watching one of her grandkids eat.
wanted to get closer to.
I thank my nephews and children for those beautiful, beautiful speeches that said it all, and your synopsis of when we spoke together was just wonderful. Thank you for that. I needed to come up here because at one of my mother's closest friends' funerals, she turned to me when her friend's daughter spoke and said, "Isn't it wonderful for a daughter to have the courage to say something about their mother at their funeral?" It was like, okay, I'm stuck now. The bar has been set. So I wrote a lot of notes, but I don't feel that I need to say much more than that. I feel like I was the luckiest daughter to have an eccentric but loving mother, and to say that anyone here would be so lucky to have a daughter as wonderful as Judy has been. And I feel so blessed to have had you as my sister, and to be there for my mother in ways that are unimaginably caring and loving. And I know that Mom appreciated that, even though in the last years it was hard to know. But I learned from my mother to be grateful for life, and I always said that even before gratitude was in vogue, which it is now, thank goodness, my mother would say at the end of every little list of complaints, or what she would say was, with God's blessing, and I'm grateful for just being here and knowing who I am. And we all are sad that at the end she didn't know who she was, but by all the words spoken, we know who she was, and we loved her for that. And I'm so happy that you're all here and sharing the memory of a wonderful woman.
Thank you all for your beautiful, heartfelt words. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. A life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat. Until looking backward or ahead, we see victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage to life everlasting. Amen. If you're able, please rise now for El Malay Rachmani.
במעלות קדושים הדברים, כסוהר רקיע מסגרים, את נשמת תביע בת שמואל ושרה, שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תחי מנוחתה. אנא בעל הרחמים, אז תראה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם, אדוני גנחלתה, ותנוג בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence To our beloved Thelma, Jaffe, known in our traditions to be a Bat Shmuel Vasera, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, going to lower the coffin and place the top on the vault now. We're going to have the family take a step out of the tent, and then we'll conclude with the earth and the cottage. Early or late, all must answer the summons to return to the source of being. We lose our hold on life when our time has come. As a leaf falls from the bough when its day is done. The deeds of the righteous enrich us all, as the fallen leaf enriches the soil beneath. The dust returns to the earth, but the spirit lives on with God. Like the stars by day, our beloved dead are not seen by mortal eyes. They shine on forever. Theirs is eternal peace. Let us be thankful for the companion who continues in our hearts, in our minds, and with God. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we will remember her. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we joys we yearn to share, remember her. So long as we live, she too shall live, for she is now a part of us as we remember.
off the board. Take it right off the board. Everyone else wishes Stephen was. Okay, right off the board.
And it's like
Yeah, see, it probably won't say the exact.
Arthur Jaffe, see?
Yeah, so it will probably, the stone, it will probably just be like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was it.
Yeah.
Well, hers is going to be right next to it. It's going to be a stone.
And I'll say,
Put right there where her body is.
and I'll be like,
I don't know. It'll be similar.
beloved wife is,
Mother. Yeah. I'm not sure. It'll probably look quite similar.
1921 to 2013.
Yeah.
What is that?
4-4.
What
Our own Ben.
That's the name of their
Shimon.
So his father was
Every day.
So this is my great-grandpa, which was your great-great-grandpa was also a Samuel.
Aren't you stepping on your dad?
So I don't know. Step in the beard.
So these are his parents.
Let's try and find this bed. Are you gonna do this until it's all filled up? She definitely needs to take a shower after this.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were allowed to push it in. That's cheating. If they moved it all over and then just pushed it in.
I wonder how they did. I wonder how they like don't. It'd be very hard to like dig holes without machines when people die.
Oh, right.
I wouldn't want to be the person putting the body down. I remember I one time saw like a story in a book about this like goblin who protected a grave because he was like a king, and then he just stayed there all his life. It seems kind of dumb to protect a.
Well, he probably maybe had like a kingdom and a huge house, and they would just happen to be there. No, that's his whole job was.
Yeah.
Turn back to the cottage.
Folks, we're going to pause for the cottage, and after the cottage is complete, those who wish to stay to help fill in the grave, they do so. Judy. Oh, okay. Blue. Very good.
Amen. Amen.
Lech ki shalach Adonai, go your way, for God has called you. Lech vanai yamak, go your way, and may God be with you. V'halach lefanecha tzitecha kavod Adonai yaspecha. May your righteous go before you. May the memory of your life be present in the hearts and minds of all those who have known you and loved you. And may the glory of God receive you. Amen. Amen. Following the burial of Jaffe family, will be observing Shiva. We'll be observing Shiva today until taking visitors today till 8, and tomorrow Friday from 1 to 4 at Emily and Seth's home, 5630 Spring Grove Drive in Solon, and then Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday from 1 to 4 and 7 to 9 at Judy and Allen's home at 25888 Fairmount Boulevard in Beechwood. Thank you.
Those who wish to stay complete the mitzvah of filling the grave, you may. Those who wish to return to their cars may also do so at this time.
Okay. So you set with Minnie and you're okay with Minnie?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you so much. That's very, very good.
Judy. We're going to have bread form of wine.